Welcome to the LibreQuest podcast. My name is Matt. This is episode 53, and today I'm joined by Michael Mrozek of the Pyra project. Hello, Michael. How's it going?
Hi there. I'm doing fine. I hope you're doing fine as well.
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here today. This is pretty exciting to get to talk to you about the Pyra.
Well, it's always nice to answer questions and get a bit of a coverage, so thanks for calling me.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, can you explain what the Pyra is and a bit of the history of Open Pandora?
Of course. The Pyra basically is the successor of the Open Pandora device, which you were talking about. The Open Pandora device is probably known to quite a few people because when we started it, it was a pretty unique device. There was nothing out there like that. Basically, it's a small mini computer, about as small as, well, a PDA, smaller than most smartphones these days, because smartphones now have 6-inch screens and stuff like that. And the Pandora had a 4.3 inch screen. You could say the Pandora looked like a Nintendo DS, but instead of the second screen, it had a keyboard. And it had a standard ARM CPU, 2 SD card slots, pretty big battery, and 800x480 pixel screen. And the main idea we had back with the Open Pandora was that this should be a device where we could emulate all major gaming systems, including Amiga. That's also why it has a keyboard, because for an Amiga, obviously you need a keyboard and a touch screen. Well, and then it turned out that the CPU of the Pandora, the OMIP 3, was actually fast enough so you could use it with a standard Linux system. So we could run XFCE as desktop manager. You could run almost any Linux program you wanted. And so it was a bit of a hybrid system between a gaming device and a working device. I know some people used it as mini PC when they were on the go. Some people used it only for game. Some did both. I did both, actually. When I was going on holidays, I just had the Pandora with me, which was enough to get emails and reply to emails and stuff like that.
That is awesome.
And the important thing, and especially if you think that the Pandora the first version of the Pandora was released 2008. And that's when, just before the first iPhone was released. So it was way long before any smartphone. So people weren't used to getting their emails on a mobile device.
Right. Yeah, that's true. What are on the Pyra? What are the system specs? Because you covered the Open Pandora, but what are the specs on the new iteration?
For the Pyra, we wanted to keep what's good with the Pandora and improve the specs where we could. So we still have the 2 SD card slots. So you can, I think the current SD cards could theoretically go up to 2 terabytes. So you could stick 4 terabyte in there.
Yeah.
And we also got a third SD card slot inside the device, which is mainly used for people who want to switch between different operating systems, or who don't want to use the internal storage and want their own operating system card just for experimenting and playing around. So we actually have 3 SD card slots. The screen is a bit bigger and is 720p, which is more than enough for that screen size. It's 5-inch now. The keyboard has been improved a bit. It now has a backlit keyboard and the keys are a bit better. Wi-Fi is now 5 gigahertz and 2.4 gigahertz, not only 2.4 as it was with the first device. But did we also improve? We have all kinds of sensors, trim, axis, 6-axis sensor, GPS, LTE 4G. So if you want to put in your SIM card and have mobile internet access, stuff like that. Well, HDMI port. And I think that's mostly it. So we try to keep the good things and improve it. For the CPU, we use the OMIP 5, which is now a bit old, I know. And it's not really used anywhere else. But we were already in contact from the Pandora with TI, able to use the OMIP 5. And back then, nobody knew that Microsoft would buy Nokia, and Nokia wouldn't need the OMIP anymore. So the consumer version of the OMIP 5 didn't even exist. And the automotive version version does need a bit of power, and basically TI completely stopped supporting the OMEP 5, so that's the only issue we have. But as another improvement was that we have now a main board and a CPU board which are plugged together. We can upgrade the Pyra in future with the new SoC if you like to.
Yeah, that's really cool to have like a upgradability in a handheld. That's like kind of unheard of, really. But it's just really cool that you have that. So I understand that you've already shipped like some of the pre-orders, but can you explain the pre-order and shipping process and how that works?
Well, at the moment we're slow with building units because, as usual, if you start a production run, you find a lot of small minor issues which you need to fix. For example, I need to do a lot of manual fixing on the cases so that they fit properly. This has already been fixed for the next iteration of cases, but at the moment it just means I need to tweak them a lot. I need to cut some plastic out. I need to sand some parts down so that it fits properly, and that makes the building process pretty slow. But we have shipped 150 units so far.
Wow.
And we are increasing. I just had to rent new rooms because I didn't have the space anymore to properly build the units. We were mostly playing Sokoban with all the boxes with the Pyra parts in there just to move the box around to get to the one you need. So a bigger space was very, very important, and I now have that. It's rented. But it's a manual building process at the moment. It's the same as Pandora. The Pandora also had a very slow building at the beginning. And with each unit, so every 200 units, we had improved case designs or board designs. And in the end, building a Pandora was completely done by the factory who actually also produces the PCBs. But there's still a long way to go there, but we've started shipping them. And I think we've got about 1,300 pre-orders. 150 already shipped. Well, and the rest will continue at the beginning a bit slower, but we are increasing the speed.
Yeah, that's something I was going to ask about because I was reading that you had a new space available just for assembly. And it's like assembly and testing, right? Because you have to assemble and test each unit before you ship it.
Yeah, of course, everything that's related to the Pyra, assembly, testing, just storing the parts, stuff like that. And not only the Pyra, because I actually also produce other devices like the Retro 2, or I produce also retro games for the Mega Drive and for the Super Nintendo, and I just need some space where this where all the building will happen.
Yeah, that's really cool. So one question I did have, because this is a consideration, but if someone wants to develop for the Pyra, are there like developer units that you can send to developers?
We had a few developer units which were the prototypes, but it always depends on what they want to develop. I can't really ship out units to people who just want to develop a bit of part of a software.
Right.
Because that's something that anyone basically can do, and porting software over to the Pyra is pretty easy because it's running a standard Debian. Linux, so basically it's just a compile and it works. So mostly the units have gone to developers who are able to help with the driver development and low-level kernel debugging stuff.
Oh, very cool. All right. Well, one question I had about kind of goes back to software. What kind of like emulators can you find like in the Pyra repositories?
Not much yet. I think we have a very good working DOSBox version. I know someone is working on RetroArch, which basically will bring all emulators at once.
Yeah.
But the software part is still, we don't have that much yet because we only had 150 units delivered. So the porting started, people are working on it, but it still, of course, takes a bit of time. Okay. But of course, you can use any emulator in the Debian repository. So if you want to play Atari ST 2600, just install Stella and you go.
Okay, and that's for like it's the ARM. Is it basically all the software is ARM based?
Yeah, exactly. It's a standard ARM CPU. So you have ARM Linux distributions. You can either install the packages or just do a quick make and configure and compile it, and that's it.
Okay, very cool. So I noticed you'd posted about the modems. Like when I was first looking at the pre-order page, I noticed that they were region specific for the modems, but is that not the case anymore?
It still is, but it might not be in the future because we are currently testing a modem, which is from the same developer, manufacturer, which is actually pin compatible. And it supports all regions. So if that modem works, then the next, after we deliver the first 500 units, the next ones will already have a modem which should work worldwide. But we're still in testing there, so we can't say anything about that.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I was really curious about that because I noticed that in one of your posts, and I was like, that sounds really interesting. I wonder if that's something they've already, started to implement, but you're just in the testing phase right now.
Yeah, exactly. We already have a board which has the modem populated, but I need to test it here, and then I of course need to send it over to someone in the US so he can test it as well.
Okay. Well, I did have a question about this, and you kind of mentioned this with the Open Pandora, but are there any like real limitations on the Pyra that would prevent a user from using it kind of like a desktop replacement?
Well, it depends what you expect. So if you want to play AAA games, then the Pyra certainly doesn't work because the CPU is not fast enough. That would be a limitation for that person.
Yes, yeah.
So it depends. One bad thing is, which we didn't know in the beginning, the OMIP 5 actually has a hardware bug. As soon as you use the idle mode, the low power idle mode, it freezes at some time. Which means that we can use that low power mode, which, for example, allows like a smartphone that you can just keep your smartphone running for 20 or 30 hours if you don't do anything and it doesn't really eat battery. That mode sadly doesn't work in the OMIP 5 and there's no real workaround known. So it will always need a bit of power. So if you don't use it, probably you have to shut it down, which is a bit bad because some people wanted to use it as a phone. But whether this can be fixed with a new CPU upgrade, but we can change the hardware bugs of the OMIP 5.
Yeah, that's something I was going to ask about. I noticed there's been a lot of talk from different users on the forums about actually using the modem to make calls, and I was wondering, has anybody actually tested that to see if it's feasible?
Well, we did before we even shipped the unit. So we did our hardware, some test runs. Both sending SMS, doing phone calls and stuff like that, and that worked.
Wow.
But he has his own testing environment, and he uses a different Linux distribution. So there are probably quite a few bugs in ours. I know, for example, sometimes the whole USB stack doesn't work. So sometimes you boot the unit and not even a USB mouse does work. It simply says there's an overpower somewhere. And the modem is also using USB, so reason for the modem not to work.
Yeah, well,
we are working on that. I actually have a new version of U-Boot already, which mostly prevents this bug. But yeah, that's why we are mostly looking for hardware and kernel developers because these are the showstoppers at the moment. You boot your unit and you have no idea why USB isn't working.
Yeah, that is it's a strange bug for sure. That's something else I was going to ask about, like external display, or I guess it would need to be USB. Or does it have HDMI out? Is that what you were saying?
It has an HDMI port, yes.
Okay, so you can use external display, keyboard, mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, very cool.
Sure, keyboard, mouse, via Bluetooth, via USB ports, 2 USB-A ports, so you can connect a keyboard and a mouse.
Okay.
HDMI would work at the moment, but as usual, the internal screen is a portrait screen because it's impossible to get landscape screens in this size, sadly. So we've got a rotation working in there, and somehow the rotation is also affecting the HDMI port at the moment. So you can't use both at the same time, but you could, for example, change your boot configuration that you can boot into HDMI and then use it. But with the previous unit, we already made tests that we can use both HDMI and the internal screen at the same time. But it's just, again, something that needs to be fixed in software at the moment.
Okay, so it's like what's the word I'm looking for? The display manager, not display manager. The rendering manager. Like, is it using X? This is basically what I'm asking.
Yes, right now we're using X. with Mate, but you can also install XFCE, LXDE. I think someone is even using what's it now, i18, or are we already at i19? I forget, but there are people using different desktop environments if they want to. That's easy. Just apt-get, apt-install, and get a desktop environment, and it works.
Will it work with, like, has anybody tried installing Plasma on it?
Yes, I did on the dev board. It worked. It actually worked pretty well. Cool. But I wouldn't use it for a device on the go, because even if the device is fast enough to run it, it will still need a lot of battery power.
Yeah, so, no doubt, for sure. Yeah. What about GPS testing?
The good thing with
Sorry, go ahead.
The good thing with Linux is you can install multiple desktop managers at the same time and just choose at boot up which one you would like to use. So if you're using the device with connected to a power supply, you can also use KDE or Plasma if you like to.
Right, and then on the go, you use something like ICE or something Mate or whatever. That makes sense.
Yeah, or XFCE or whatever you like best. Yeah.
So the GPS navigation, that was one thing that I wanted to ask about. Like, has there been any testing? Like, are there any maps available that you can install to use with GPS?
Well, there's nothing yet in the repository, but again, our hardware developer who had to ensure everything is working, he was actually using it with Tango GPS, and he used also some map software. I think there is some mapping software available for Linux for free. But I'm not sure which one that was. Or maybe Tango GPS is also possible to use, OpenStreetMaps or something like that.
Yeah, no, I've heard of OpenStreetMaps. I think I saw some discussion in the forums about that as well. So I wasn't sure if like anybody had any like real, experience with their Pyra, if they'd actually done any testing. I wasn't able to find it.
People were already using GPS on the Pandora. They just connected an external GPS dongle and used the software for it. So there has to be some software out there for Linux.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so I think that brings me to the end of my questions. Really, is there any details that you want to mention about the Pyra stuff that I didn't think to ask about?
I'm not sure if there are a lot of details. We mentioned the upgradability. Well, the most important thing for the moment is the Pyra as is. We only developed mostly the hardware, made sure the hardware works, and are now delivering it. So there's a lot of stuff to be done in software. So that's something, if you want to get a Pyra now, well, you can't get it now because we're still delivering to pre-orders before we can ship to anybody else. But if you get a Pyra now, if you expect a fully working system like on Android, that's not going to happen at the moment. But it was the same with the Pandora. For the first 1.5 years, something about that, the Pandora had some working stuff, but it also had a lot of bugs, and the battery time was pretty bad. And this all improved over time, because the more units they are delivered, the more people are working on the software, the more hardware cracks you have. And if somebody is, for example, not content how the modem works, then he will try to get it working better, maybe even codes a guide for that, a GUI, and then releases it. So at the moment, the software is pretty basic. It's a standard stock Debian with not a lot of improvements, and there's still a lot of work to do, but it was the same with the Pandora. It will improve over time.
Very cool. And if listeners want to find where to pre-order the Pyra, or where to find more details on the Pyra, where would they go?
Well, the pre-order would be on dragonbox.de, and more information about the Pyra obviously is on our homepage. There's a lot of interesting stuff on the boards as well, and everybody is welcome to join the boards and discuss with us. That's on pyra-handheld.com.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Michael, for being here. It's been really fun talking to you.
Thanks a lot for your questions. So if there's anything I can help you, let me know.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can join me on Locals at LibreQuest.locals.com, where I'll be posting exclusive interviews, some of my music, and other things, and we can talk about whatever you want to talk about as well. For other ways to support me, you can visit LibreQuest.org, that's LibreQuest.org, and thank you for being a listener. Until next time, I'm Matt, and this is LibreQuest.